Hi everyone, my name is John. Welcome back to my channel. It is New Year's Eve around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, so in a few hours I'm going to start to lose light and people all around me are going to start firing off fireworks. So while you can still hear me, let me make this video. Tomorrow is going to be the first day of Historathon 2025, a new day of the year, so a new quarter. And I have 13 or 14 books, depending on how you want to count, for you to consider. One of them I've actually read before, and the others are possibilities for you. If you're new to Historathon, we do this. Most of the co-hosts put out piles of possibility videos for every quarter, just to give people who are new to a time period that we're talking about or interested in something to sort of dip your feet in. If you don't have any ideas, if you're new to reading history, here are some things to consider. There are also, since this is the third year of Historathon, this is my third pile of possibilities video for quarter one. So what I'll try to remember to do when I upload this video is link below in the notes the links for quarter one recommendations for 2023 and 2024 as well. So if none of these float your boat, you can go get about 12 to 15 recommendations per video for those as well. So I started something last year. I think I made it 2 videos into a what was hopefully going to be a long series. This is going to be a year-long thing. And I don't know, I'm not going to make any promises about how many more I'll do. But if there is interest, let me know below, and I will see what I can do. I have been going through a book, chapter by chapter, and the book is Ernst Breissig's Historiography, Ancient, Medieval, and Modern. And what this is about 30 chapters or so of little potted chapters in historiography where it takes up a theme and just talks about it. So I think what I did last year was I did an introduction to the series, episode 1, and then I talked about the first volume in the first chapter in here, which is called The Emergence of Greek Historiography. So we're going all the way back to the beginning, at least in Europe. And if there's any interest in that, let me know. And I may or may not get too much further with this. So this is one thing that might be going on in my channel in 2025. All right. So as far as more systematic reading, there are 3 obligations that I've already made. So, Buddy reads, I guess, and one of them is for January. And this is the book that I've already read. I've actually already read it twice. Once in college, once maybe 10 or 15 years ago, and I'm really looking forward to reading it again. It is one of my all-time favorite books, and it is The Confessions of St. Augustine. If you're unfamiliar with St. Augustine, he was a late 4th, early 5th century bishop in the church, one of the great church fathers. And this is basically his sort of autobiography, his conversion story, and so many other things. It is searching and inward and beautiful and honest, brutally honest, and one of the few books I've ever read that I can recommend unreservedly and wholeheartedly for anyone interested in the subject. I think I'm reading this with someone, Brendan, from the Discord, who will be reading this for the first time, and I'm fascinated to see what he will think of this. So, Augustine's Confessions. Next, I think these are both. This is also with Brendan and maybe Brian from the Discord too. Anyone else who wants to join in, let us know. I mean, there are no. We're not saying no one can join. So, this is David Lindbergh's book, The Beginnings of Western Science, the European Scientific Traditions in Philosophical, Religious, and Institutional Context, Prehistory to AD 1450, it says, yes, 1450. So this is a rewriting, this is a pretty significant re-editing of the first edition that brings in new material from, looks like the Muslim Golden Age and Mesopotamian science, Greek astronomy. There is a pretty well-known version of this book that's the first edition, but I'll be reading this one. And this is, if you like history of science, there is a science Discord, and, well, there's also a philosophy Discord. You can go over to Justin's channel, Triumphal Reads channel. His information will be below, and he's another one of the co-hosts. I am too. And you can probably read this for those channels as well, since it covers all the bases. But yeah, this covers all the history. I mean, all the science. So everything from what we think of as modern science, chemistry, physics, astronomy, all the way back to older sciences, like back when science was less differentiated, natural science, astrology, back when that was considered to be a science, etc. So it's a big, broad, sweeping thing. And David Lindbergh is a great historian of science, so we'll do that as well in February. And also what we're doing in February is a book from Princeton University Press called, I suggested this just offhand, had no idea in the world that maybe 15 or 20 people would be interested in it, but a lot of people have expressed interest, and for that I'm thankful. This is Helena Rosenblatt's The Lost History of Liberalism, from Ancient Rome to the 21st Century. And you might be asking why we're reading this in quarter one, and I don't know, to be quite honest, other than the fact that I suggested it, and in the first chapter, Cicero, the title of the first chapter, Cicero is name-checked. So that might be the only qualifying factor for it to be included in the first quarter of Historathon. This is almost certainly much more of a quarter 3 and 4 book, but since it does say Ancient Rome right there in the title, we'll read it in February. By the way, it's not too late. You still have a month to express interest if you are watching this and, excuse me, not in the Discord or Voxer, and you haven't chimed in yet. Let us know. We're going to make a Voxer group. Probably going to talk about it in the Discord as well. And it's free for everyone. Free to everyone. Okay, quickly, I don't like showing books repeatedly in these videos because who wants to look at the same book over and over again? But I did hold this up last year, I think, very quickly. Talked about a little bit more there. I don't think Suetonius needs too much of an introduction. He was one of our primary sources for really understanding that transition period and the period immediately after the change from the Republic to the Empire. And this is his set of 12 mini biographies of the first 12 Roman emperors. So we start with Caesar, and that's the only one I've read, by the way. I read it last year, but there's 11 more. We have Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, Nero, Galba, Otho, Vitellius, Vespasian, Titus, and Domitian. So I need to read those. And those are possibilities for the next 3 months. And something I'm pretty sure I haven't shown on, I'm certain I haven't shown, is this, which is, I made it through about 20 pages and then set it aside a few years ago after I bought it at one of those Princeton University flash sales where you get books for 70% off. And this is Maria Michela Sassi's The Beginnings of Philosophy in Greece. This is not an anthology of pre-Socratic philosophy. It seems to be more like a sociological and historical study of the emergence of philosophical questioning in Greece. So let me read a bit of the inside matter to you, just to see if you're interested. How can we talk about beginnings of philosophy today? And how can we avoid the conventional opposition of mythology and the dawn of reason, and instead explore the multiple types of thought that emerged between them? In this acclaimed book, Maria Michela Sassi reconstructs the intellectual world of the early Greek pre-Socratics to provide a richer understanding of the roots of what used to be called the Greek miracle. The beginnings of the long process leading to philosophy were characterized by intellectual diversity and geographic polycentrism. In the 6th and 5th centuries BC, between the Asian shores of Ionia and the Greek city-states of southern Italy, thinkers started to reflect on the cosmic order, elaborate doctrines on the soul, write in solemn Homeric meter, or later abandon poetry for an assertive prose. And yet the pre-Socratics, whether the Milesian natural thinkers, the rhapsode Xenophanes, the mathematician and shaman Pythagoras, the naturalist and seer Empedocles, the oracular Heraclitus, or the inspired Parmenides, all shared an approach to critical thinking that, by questioning traditional viewpoints, revolutionized knowledge. So it's not a summary of what each philosopher said, but sort of how philosophy developed in the first place before Socrates. So the beginnings of philosophy in Greece. I have one possibility from Cambridge University Press. Oh, glare. This is by Josiah Osgood, and this is Caesar's Legacy: Civil War and the Emergence of the Roman Empire. When Caesar was finally assassinated on the Ides of March in 44 BC, his great-nephew, who he took into his family as his sort of adopted son, his name was Octavian, and he was a very, very young man. He was 18, maybe 17 years old when his great-uncle was assassinated in the Senate. And this story, apparently this book is about the sort of transition from, again, the Republic to the Empire, and about how that boy, whose name was Octavian, but became Augustus, how that played out. How Augustus would sort of consolidate power. He killed Pompey the Great's son. He eventually did away with Antony and Cleopatra, and how he spent the last 40 years of his life as emperor. And it's also about how Roman citizens reconciled themselves to that very real and abrupt change in political climate from a republic to an autocracy, basically. So, Caesar's Legacy: Civil War and Emergence of the Roman Empire. The Emergence of the Roman Empire, by Josiah Osgood. Here's a recommendation, or a possibility, I should say. I can't recommend it since I haven't read it, but by someone whose name always pops up in Q1 possibility list. His name is Anthony Everett. And I read his biography of Cicero. Speaking of Cicero, Cicero is not finished in this pile yet either. And it was a really good book, probably one of the better 4 or 5 books I read last year. In 2024, that is. And I remembered that I had this laying around. And this is his biography of Hadrian, the Roman Emperor Hadrian. And I'll read you a little bit. Born in AD 76, Hadrian lived through and ruled during a tempestuous era, a time when the Colosseum was opened to the public and Pompeii was buried under a mountain of lava and ash. Although that happened when he was only 3 years old, so. Everett vividly recounts Hadrian's thrilling life in which the emperor brings a century of disorder and costly warfare to a peaceful conclusion while demonstrating how a monarchy can be compatible with good governance. Hadrian was brave and astute, despite his sometimes prickly demeanor, as well as an accomplished huntsman, poet, and student of philosophy. What distinguished Hadrian's rule, according to Everett, were 2 insights that inevitably ensured the empire's long and prosperous future. I guess, at least in the short term. He ended Rome's territorial expansion, which had become strategically and economically untenable, by fortifying her boundaries, like we see in the Wall of Hadrian, the Walls of Hadrian. And he effectively Hellenized Rome by anointing Athens as the empire's cultural center, thereby making Greek learning and art vastly more prominent in Roman life. So, a biography of one of the 5 good Roman emperors, so they say. Let me couple these 2 books, since they're related in subject matter. Do some moving around here. I have 2 books on ancient Christianity. The first, well, one is the first 5 centuries, and the next one is a little bit more than that. Let's do the shorter first 5 centuries first. This is also from Princeton University Press. It is by Paula Fredrickson, and it came out very, very recently, either this year or 2024. This is Ancient Christianity's The First 500 Years. I've shown this in a video, I believe, but if I haven't, here you go. The history of early Christianity, especially one of my abiding interests. The ancient Mediterranean teemed with gods. For centuries, a practical religious pluralism prevailed. How then did one particular god come to dominate the politics and piety of the late Roman Empire? In Ancient Christianities, Paula Fredrickson traces the evolution of early Christianity, or rather early Christianities, through 5 centuries of empire, mapping its pathways from the hills of Judea to the halls of Rome and Constantinople. It's a story with a sprawling cast of characters, not only theologians, bishops, and emperors, but also gods and demons, angels and magicians, astrologers and ascetics, saints and heretics, aristocratic patrons, and millenarian enthusiasts. All play their part in the development of what became and remains an energetically diverse biblical religion. The New Testament, as we know it, represents only a small selection of the many Gospels, letters, Acts of the Apostles, and Revelations that circulated before the establishment of the Imperial Church. It tells how the Gospel passed from Jesus to the Apostles, thence to Paul. But by using our peripheral vision, by looking to non-canonical and paracanonical texts, and by availing ourselves of information derived from papyri, inscriptions and archaeology, we can see a different, richer, much less linear story emerging. Fredrickson brings together these many sources to reconstruct the lively interactions of pagans, Jews, and Christians, tracing the conversions of Christianity from an energetic form of Jewish messianism to an arm of the late Roman state. It's very short. It's on the order of 200 pages. But I saw that they were coming out. I think this is from their fall 2024 catalog. And they occasionally will send me things that I request. And I saw this, and given my set of interests, I had to request this. So this is also a possibility. Along the same lines, but reaches into the Middle Ages, is, if you're interested in the topic, certainly someone whose name you should be familiar with, you may already be familiar with. He is one of my favorite historians, and maybe my favorite historian on this topic. His name is Peter Brown, and I'll tell you a little bit about this book. Haven't read it, but it takes the subject of early Christianity and, like I said, expands it just a little bit. You have, instead of up to the year 500, you have 200 to 1,000. So this looks at more the establishment, what used to be called sort of the Dark Ages, now the early Middle Ages, and looks at some of the important people, early asceticism, just some of the important movements and ideas that were going around Frankish society, monasticism, stuff like that. Peter Brown, by the way, is the author, not only my favorite historian on the subject, but maybe one of my favorite biographers, certainly the author of my favorite biography of all time. He wrote a biography in the late 1960s of someone I've already mentioned, St. Augustine. And if you can get your hands on that biography, it should still be in print. It is absolutely spectacular. And you're interested in Augustine's life, reading that book, Brown's biography of Augustine, along with the Confessions, would be a wonderful Q1 project. Just to dive deep into one of the most fascinating minds of, like I said, the late 4th and early 5th century. So there's a Peter Brown suggestion and another Peter Brown suggestion for you. I didn't dig up the Augustine biography, but it's around here somewhere. I have 4 more books. Let's see. My last mention, I think, of Cicero. I also have an interest in Cicero because in college I took a Hellenistic philosophy class, and I chose to write my end of course paper on one of the books that Cicero wrote when he was in self-imposed exile after the death of his daughter Tullia. The book is called The Tusculan Disputations, and I rather enjoyed the Tusculan Disputations. Cicero is a really interesting character. He's a little prickly. Some people rightly think he's a little bit of a blowhard and a gas bag, and he absolutely is. And he's not always the best philosopher either. But in the Tusculan Disputations, when he was meditating and grieving, like I said, over the death of his daughter, that produced some pretty interesting stuff. And this is a Penguin Classics version of another book that he wrote. He wrote a lot of these books called De Re something in Latin, which just means, on the subject of, or concerning, or regarding. And this is on the nature of the gods. It is his book about basically pagan theology. So, towards the end of his life, Cicero turned away from his oratorical and political career and instead took to matters of philosophy and religion. The dialogue, The Nature of the Gods, exposes his own views on these subjects, explores, not exposes, his own views on these subjects as a monotheist and member of the academic school, and considers the opinion of other philosophical schools of the Hellenistic age through the figures of Velius the Epicurean and Balbus the Stoic. Eloquent, clearly argued, and surprisingly modern, it focuses on a series of fundamental religious questions, including, is there a God? If so, does he answer prayers or intervene in human affairs? Does he know the future? Does morality need the support of religion? And of course, Cicero was profoundly influential in the thought of subsequent thinkers, including Augustine and many other church fathers. Aquinas, even. His name checked on the back here. So, Cicero, The Nature of the Gods. I bought this last year at a Rutgers University Press book sale. Found it for a song, so I had to pick it up. This is George Ostrogorski's History of the Byzantine State. It is nice, and it's probably a little bit bigger than it looks. It's only about 500 pages. About 15 years ago or so, I tried to read the John Julius Norwich, the one-volume abridgment of his 3-volume History of the Byzantine Empire. And I don't know what went wrong with it. Maybe I just wasn't in the headspace. But it didn't go well. It just read like a quick summary. Just a breezy summary of this emperor did this, then this emperor did this, and then this battle, and then this emperor did this, and then this emperor died, and then there was the next emperor. And it didn't really give you any sort of sense of rootedness in the culture or the ideas that were important to the Byzantines or anything. So maybe this will be a little bit better. I was thinking about maybe giving the Norwich a second chance, but in the full version, the 3-volume version, not the 1-volume abridgment. But this takes us from the 4th century, so around the time of Christianity's institutionalization in the Roman Empire in the West, and then the fall of the West and the movement of the empire to the east, all the way up through 1453, when of course the Byzantine Empire falls into the hands of the Ottomans. So another possibility, the History of the Byzantine State by George Ostrogorski. I'll save that for last. Another name that kind of floats around, not as popular as Anthony Everett, but Ronald Hutton, who is also another interesting historian. This will be my first Ronald Hutton book. This is his book called Blood and Mistletoe, which I bought last year from Yale. The history of the Druids in Britain. The Druids being the sort of clerical, priestly class of the Celtic peoples, who famously never left any written records, possibly because, and I think this is somewhat speculative on historians' part, but because it may have been against their religious ideals to do so. But because of the lack of written records, their history is a bit shrouded, and we might have to assume more than than what we ideally should. And I think when we use the word druid, we conjure images more than we actually are able to cobble together facts. You know, sort of that cover art is indicative of what I think a lot of people just think. But I don't really know if any of that's true, and I've never read a book on the Druids before. So here's my opportunity. Let me know if you have. Let me know if you've read any of these, to be honest. Fascinated to know what other people's opinions of these books are. And we have something in the Discord called side quests. So for side quests, you don't necessarily have to stick to nonfiction history. You can read historical fiction. You can read, you can watch movies or documentaries that are related to the era that we're reading about. So one of the things I wanted to dig up, this was just one possibility. I mean, I could have picked 15 or 20 others or more, is a book I've never read, obviously, admitted that straight up front. This is the Historathon by Petronius. At least we think it's by Petronius. And this is a book about a kind of well-to-do man by the name of Encolpius and his slave, whose name is Giton. And there's another young man named Acidulus who kind of lusts after Giton. And this is a satire, a Menippean satire in prose, and sort of one of the classics of Roman literature. So it's not strictly history, of course, but it goes with the time period. And if I end up reading it, I'll probably talk about it a little bit. We'll certainly review it in a video if I do, like I do with everything I read eventually. And that, oh goodness, the glare is so bad. That is where I'm going to wrap things up at 33 minutes. Apologies for the length. But let me know if you have any opinions on these books, if any of them sound good. Also, if you're interested in that historiography thing, which I mentioned at the top of the video, leave me a note down below. And I will post this 8 a.m. Central Standard Time tomorrow. I hope everyone has a wonderful New Year's and everyone has a wonderful Quarter 1 reading experience. Hope to see what everyone's reading, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.